I'll introduce tonight's speaker. Tonight's guest is Jeffrey Boss, and Jeff works at the Amana Centre in Oman. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 3 a.m. in Oman, or just after 3, Jeff?
Yeah, it's just after 3 a.m., which is no trouble. I usually wake up at 4 a.m.
Really? That's
Yep.
part of, is that a part of your routine, a spiritual discipline? What's your reason for getting up so early in the morning?
My body just says wake up. And around 9 o'clock, I'm just dead. So I don't know.
Interesting. Well, Jeff has been working in the area of missions and has been deeply involved in conversations about what it means to consider how the gospel crosses cultures, and what it means to be present in other cultures, and to consider what it means to live the image-bearing life in different parts of the world. And so he brings some unique perspective. And I've asked him to join us tonight so that he can tell us a little bit about the unique work that's done at the Amana Centre in Oman, which is doing some unique multi-faith work. And I think helping those of us who are somewhat new to living in a multi-faith context, because I think for quite a while, certainly in the Canadian context we're in, there's a lot of Christian assumptions about how to do everything. But as we become more multicultural and with different immigration, we're also learning what does it mean to be religiously hospitable while also holding your own beliefs with integrity. So we've talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago in a discussion about conversion. And so I'm pleased that Jeff can join us. So thank you for joining us tonight, Jeff. Why don't we begin first by just talking a little bit about your journey, so that we can let everybody who's joined us tonight to know a little more about who you are. Tell us a bit about how you ended up in Oman. What's been some of the steps of the journey to bringing you there?
Well, it's a long journey. It's a journey in which I would say I've never said yes, Lord, but I've also never said no, Lord. I've never said no to God's calling. And always when there's a push, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, but I've gone along with it. I guess my journey started, already as a university student, railing against religion and seeking God. And those are two different things. Religion is one thing, and seeking God is another thing. Now, they do overlap and they do go together. And my dissatisfaction with religion and my pursuit for God actually took me to seminary. And in the course of seminary, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm seeking God, but I'm in a degree that's going to lead me to become a minister. But all of a sudden, I found myself in Bangladesh, where an opportunity became available to teach, and that was my undergraduate focus in education. So I took a position in Bangladesh that would lead me into teaching at a theological seminary in Bangladesh. God, I would have never chosen Bangladesh. When I was asked to consider this position, I had to look on a map, where is Bangladesh? But what I found in Bangladesh is similar to what I have found in my own spirit. There's something different between religion and seeking God. But again, there's also some overlap. And so that's a question I continue to struggle with, is how does religion enable us to seek God? And the other thing that I discovered in Bangladesh is that I am not my own. And I liked how Sid started out at the beginning saying, Think about the other. Where did others help you? Where did you help others? I discovered when I moved to Bangladesh that I was suddenly a different person. I knew who Jeffrey Boss was, living in the United States, in a community that was, by and large, Judeo-Christian. Suddenly I found myself in a community where there is a Muslim majority, a community where my skin is different, and I just changed how I could conceptualize myself. I wasn't the same person. Now, does that make any sense to you?
It does to me, and I think there's a few people who could probably relate.
When you change your context, you become a different person. I mean, it's really obvious. We do this all the time. You're in high school, you're a high schooler. That's part of your identity. Then you graduate, you go to university, you're not a high schooler anymore. You're a university student. Boom, your identity changed. I was unmarried, I got married. Now I'm a married person. My son was born and I became a father. And so it's always this other, something outside of us that is making us who we are. And that's something that really boggled me as a missionary living cross-culturally. And the work in Bangladesh started to take me further and further into the other. I was at an interdenominational seminary where I was working with Christians of different persuasions, Christians who had basically, we could say, different religions, not in the sense of, distinguishing between, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, but there's a lot of difference just within Christianity. And one of the things I discovered is, the kind of Christian I am, I call myself Reformed or Presbyterian. That's kind of what I inherited and I've eventually embraced. I discovered in Bangladesh, on some points, I have more in common with my Muslim neighbor than, an American Baptist. And that was really striking to me. How could that be? We're supposedly of different religions, but we're getting along. We're agreeing on a lot of things. Whereas with other Christians, I just fight with them. We don't see eye to eye. So I got more and more interested in that question of the differences of Christianity, the diversity of Christianity. Why wouldn't God have us all just think the same way and get it straight? Is that a result of sin? And then my work in this interdenominational context just continued further and further into the other, and I got more involved in conversations and just talking with people of other faiths, and joined up with the Amana Central Committee, the Brothers of Taizé, which is an ecumenical order of brothers that's Protestant and Catholic. And with them, I just started asking these questions about how do we believe? I got more and more curious about this question, how do I believe? And I gave up the question of what do I believe? Because if I believe in God, and God is other, in fact, I became convinced that God is wholly other. The only thing I can know about God is that, well, whatever I can think of God, God is greater than that. So every idea I have about God is not God, because whatever I can think about God, God is greater than that. So if I try to think of the most loving God, God is even more loving than that. So my conception of God was just going crazy. And I didn't know how to reach this God again. This is me trying to seek God. So then I became more and more interested in, well, what are the ways? What are the practices? What are the things that we do? Not so much about what I believe, but how do I believe? And that's what became a really interesting question for me. And for me, interfaith work, which is what brought me finally to Amana Centre, where our focus is on Christian-Muslim relations. Interfaith work is very interesting to me because it's part of my own journey and exploration. And along the way, what has fascinated me is how God has been discipling me through in my encounters, engagements, and conversations and relationships with people of other religions. And one of the reasons you travel abroad to study is you want to go see something different. You want to learn something new. And we only learn when we encounter something different or something new. You don't learn old things, you learn new things. And if you learn something that's the same as what you already know, well, then it's really not learning. Learning is always different. Learning is always other. And so that's where encounters with the other have become very profound for me. Now, I know it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and I philosophize heavy till about 5 a.m. and then I just shut down. So I'm probably just thinking too hard. You probably just want to hear some stories about, gross things. I can tell those too. But let me just stop there a minute, because I'll just keep rambling on and on.
But I think there's a lot of different rabbit trails we probably could go down from a philosophical perspective of interfaith, and we'll pick up on some of those, and I would encourage the students to pick up on the threads they want to pick up on. But I think before we head in that direction, tell us a bit about the Amana Centre, and I don't know if you want to try and show the video or not with our audio issues. It might be just easier for us to hear from you, and then I'll post the link afterwards.
Yeah, I think that would.
Yeah, the other option is otherwise I could pull it up, but I think I'm happy just hearing from you.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe you could pull it up.
Well,
yeah, I'm kind of lost right now. I don't know where I am. I am virtually connected on 2 devices simultaneously.
All right. Well, I will pull this up and I will screen share then. So folks, this is something that Jeff sent to me earlier today. It is a 3-minute introduction to the Amana Centre, and it also then visually gives you an idea of the context that Jeff is working in.
Yeah, just so you can see what's outside of me here during the daylight. And this is particularly focused on a group of Princeton University students visiting Amana Centre.
Hopefully you can catch the sound. Please put your sound all the way up. Of course, means that I have to have internet that's running. Can you guys hear?
There's no sound.
Not really. No, I can't hear anything.
Might want to share your computer sound.
How do I do that?
The bottom.
At the
ahead.
bottom? Okay. Of the Zoom.
Yeah.
You have to do it before you hit share screen. So you have to cancel the sharing of the screen for a minute.
Gotcha.
Like if you go,
Okay, now hit share screen.
It's a box to check at the bottom.
And there's a box at the bottom that says share screen and optimize for video. Check both boxes.
Ah. Gotcha.
you can also do that.
This is good to know. You guys taught me something tonight. All right, I will start that over.
The Amana Centre is a place, but it's also people who are committed to creating an environment where people of different cultures and religions can come and experience each other as they are, not as we perceive them to be, so that we can build understanding and trust between people of different religions and cultures. So when they come here, they get to experience a whole plethora of things. They'll get to experience Omani hospitality. They'll get to experience an environment where it is safe to ask questions. You know, the other part that we do is we get to explore the diversity of this wonderful country, whether it's the natural beauty, driving a four-wheel drive vehicle through the desert to a desert camp and experiencing the silence and the beauty of the sands. It's seeing a grand mosque that welcomes people from all religions and from all cultures. So who can come to the Amana Centre? People of all faith, people of no faith, people of any culture, or people of multiple cultures can come and be welcomed here at Amana Centre to learn and grow both personally and as a community.
It's been an invaluable experience to bring my Princeton students here to Oman with Amana. My students have had an opportunity to really immerse themselves in the culture, to meet people with so many different perspectives, so many different experiences. The folks that we've been meeting are people of faith. They're people who are civil servants of so many different kinds, and they are helping my students to think about the interfaith relationships that they want to have, to think about the kind of citizens that they want to be, and to think about what they want to take back home to our own institution and the changes that they want to make there.
So one thing I learned is that interfaith living, especially in such a unique and diverse place, comes in a lot of different forms. In Oman, we see a lot of different faith traditions living side by side for a long time, and everyone's respectful of each other's beliefs, but they also are very strong in their own personal beliefs. People care about their beliefs, but they also care about each other.
Just being in Oman and like seeing all of these amazing places, for me, like that's just been so great because we're really being immersed and seeing everything this beautiful country has to offer.
There is so much that we can learn from each other, and not just about each other's traditions, but about each other as people and about ourselves. When we understand why does someone else believe what they believe, then it begins to help us to understand the questions we ask and not just receive the answers that have been passed down to us.
So as they say here in Oman, ahlan wa sahlan. Please, you are welcome to come, and we await your visit here to be with us at Amana Centre.
So Jeff, I don't, if you want to pick up on that introduction to say a little bit more. Oh.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of the background of the history of this place and then talk a little bit about Oman and its uniqueness. So the Amana Centre is essentially an educational institute, but we work with governments. And now this is interesting. What is a missionary doing working with governments? Well, there's a history here. The American mission in Oman and in other places of the Gulf began with medical missions, building hospitals, with educational missions, starting schools, and also some church planting work early on. Then oil came. Then suddenly the government has sufficient funds to develop its own hospitals, its own schools. And then at the same time, all of a sudden, people from around the world started pouring into the Gulf. So the American mission turned over its hospitals, it closed its schools because the government of Oman was now capable and able. The church plants that had been in Oman kind of disappeared during the revolution, and as the missions then turned their focus to this wave of migrant workers who were pouring into Oman. Surprisingly, Oman is 5% Christian. When it's Christmas time, you know, I can go down to the mall and see Christmas decorations. It's 5% Christian because 40% of the population here in Oman is expatriate. And there's a lot of Christians who come to Oman from India, the Philippines, China. And that's the case through all the Gulf. The Gulf is surprisingly very non-Arab. Oman still has a Omani majority, but in other places like United Arab Emirates, it's 90% expatriates. I mean, the Gulf is a very cosmopolitan place. So the mission was going to close. The mission had established a church, a Protestant church with these expatriates. It now operates independently. And the mission was going to close. And they're packing their bags and on their way out. And the director of the mission made one more stop by the Minister of Religious Affairs and said, basically, you know, it's been great being here, and I guess we're going to go. But the Minister of Religious Affairs said, no, you're not. We want you to stay and help us build a peaceful and tolerant society. So the request for the mission to carry on is coming from the government. And I think this is very interesting. Missions has done many different things and served society in many different ways, like medicine and education. But in government, it's a very interesting request. And the programs that the Amana Centre then developed out of this are mainly educational and mainly focused on bringing people together. The charge from the Ministry of Religious Affairs is help Muslims and Christians understand each other. Help Muslims and Christians know each other. So like the video you watched is a group of university students coming from the US to Oman to get to know who Muslims are. We have also worked in the area of conflict resolution. Oman is one of the places in the world, few places in the world, where just about anybody can get a visa. Iranians can get visas here, Americans can get visas here, Canadians can get visas here, and I don't know who's Canada's greatest enemy. And Americans can get visas here. Makes it a very unique place. I don't know where Canada ranks, but on some of the rankings for the most peaceful nations in the world, usually Finland's #1, but Oman is often in the top 5. It is surprisingly here in the Gulf, one of the most peaceful countries in the world. And so it makes Oman a wonderful place to bring people who are experiencing conflict. So another program we run is called our Safe Space Program. We bring people to Oman from conflict zones. Now, they could be people from, say, Nigeria, Muslims and Christians, or people from places like Pakistan and Bangladesh, or Pakistan and India. We'll bring them to our center and create a safe space where they can begin talking. And then we do just about anything that comes our way. We're pretty flexible that way. Everything in these last years shifted online. Yeah, Sid.
Well, it just leads me to 2 questions, because one, I mean, you call yourself a missionary. And certainly in the Christian context, when people have an image of a missionary, it is of how do we bring Christianity to another nation, and how do we bring the gospel to another nation. So it begs the question in terms of how has your understanding of missions shifted, and how do you see that presence, that gospel presence? And I think that's worth us pondering. It also then subsequently leads me to think, if some of these things are being done so well there, what is it that we have to learn from a place like Oman in terms of how we can better do some of these multi-faith or living together in a pluralistic context? So take it away.
Yeah, well, let me start by complimenting you. I mean, I think Canadians do a great job of this. And the fact that you have so many challenges, say, with Indigenous peoples that you're wrestling with, is testament to how well Canadians are doing with this. You're getting down to some really nitty-gritty and some really tough issues. I think a lot of countries, particularly Americans, are way behind. They can't even broach these tough issues and find ways to talk about them. Let me tell you a little bit about the context in Oman that I think is unique. I know Canadians like good government. You know, Americans, we're obsessed with freedom. We want our freedom. I think Omanis are a little bit like Canadians in that they value good government in the sense that government can be protective. And a lot of people, and again, I'm picking on Americans, think that the opposite of freedom is oppression. But it's not. On the spectrum of freedom, on the other end is protection. And the government in Oman has sought to be protective, which is a way of appreciating things. Americans, we think, you know, if you love something, set it free. But if you love something, protect it. And so the government in Oman has been very protective of religion. And we see this because the government gives spaces to Christians to worship. You can't just go build a church anywhere you want in Oman. You have to build the church on the spaces that are designated by the government. You can't just start your own religious group in Oman. You have to get permission by the government. Now, what's interesting is that isn't just for Christians. That's for Muslims as well. The Muslims in Oman can't just put up a mosque. They have to have permission from the government. So we live under a totalitarian regime, but it's a good regime because the land that the Christians have to be on was given by His Majesty. His Majesty even offered to give the churches a pipe organ. And those church campuses, compounds have never been attacked, never even been, you know, defaced or vandalized. The Christians are protected in Oman. But then there's also rules you have to abide by. And one is we are not permitted to proselytize. And now by proselytizing, it's what I mean is we are not permitted in Oman as Christians to say anything negative about another person's religion. If I say something against the prophet, I'll be packing my bags tomorrow. But if a Muslim in Oman says something against Jesus, he'll find himself in jail. So it goes both ways. But what we are permitted to do here in Oman is to speak positively about our own faith. And so we are able to be witnesses. I can talk about my faith freely, so long as the other person wants to listen. But what gives me the right to speak about my faith? It's my willingness to listen to others talk about their faith. And so that's what I've come to understand that, you know, preaching the gospel, which is, you know, like a monologue, it's just one, I get to talk, everybody else has to listen, is really one way on a two-way street. If we want the right to speak, we have to listen first. And then we have to listen again after we speak. So for me, communication has to go two ways. It has to be dialogical. Just as our relationship with God is dialogical. You know, we speak to God, but we also listen to God. So that was a real profound discovery for me. The other thing I have really become convinced of is that it is not my role to bring somebody into the church. It is not my role to make a Muslim a Christian. Because as followers of Christ, as a Christian, as I call myself, I don't believe in the Christian religion. I believe in Jesus Christ. I think this is what's unique. We are called to convert and to convert others, not to a religion, but to a relationship with Jesus. Does that make any sense or resonate with any of you? Because this is where I'm bucking something that it's ingrained in our heads. And I tried to allude this when I was talking about my own journey, how there's religion, but there's also seeking God. And sometimes they go together, but sometimes they don't go together.
I could pick up on that, Jeff, but I think it's great if others want to jump in on what Jeff has been saying so far. I think it's important that this is a great opportunity for folks to ask their questions or to push back even on what Jeff is saying, because that's a way of being able to explore this particular topic.
I have a question. Like,
Yeah, Kim.
isn't community like just as important? Like, we're focusing a lot on the relationship with God, like it's just him and us, but isn't like going to church, being part of like church groups, doing things together, like also important?
I think so. And I would say doing things with others. Community is a very hard thing to define, but a lot of people like to summarize the essence of our faith as, and this is a lot of people who are trying to get away from the, Christianity is preaching the gospel and you must be converting people. That's the essence of Christianity. There's some others who will say, no. The essence of Christianity is loving God and loving your neighbor. And so, yeah, community is very important. And as I've come to understand this passage is, we often make it two things: loving God, loving your neighbor. I think that's one thing. I'm starting to believe that, this question, I said, okay, there's religion, going to church, and then there's seeking God. And I'm trying to figure out that, well, what is this seeking God? And is it something, just mystical out there? And I've tried that, but I've come back to just what you're saying. No, it's very important to engage with others. And I've started to come to think that loving God is loving neighbor. They're the same thing. So if I love God, I love my community. If I'm in relationship with God, I'm in relationship with community. And of course, the ways that we've done church, throughout the ages is one way to be in community. And I think, I go to church. It's a habit. I even go to Zoom church. I just can't break my habit of going to church. I'm just like, oh, I gotta go to church. So I Zoom, and I hate Zooming. And even still, it's just like, I gotta Zoom church. It's just this habit. I don't know. I wish I could stop going to church, but it's just this habit. I just do it. Like brushing my teeth. But that's what's really interesting to me is, what are these habits that enable us to love God and love community? Like getting together like we are right now. I have teenage children, and my wife and I are like, oh, church, let's go. And they're like, not again. Why? And this is where I think there's a difference between religion and seeking God. It strikes me that for them, Zoom church does not create community. It does not enable them to seek God. And so then I question, is there another way? Or do I have to make them sit and watch the computer screen while we do Zoom church? This is what I struggle with. Is making them sit through Zoom church really going to help them come to God? And I've really wondered, about community. So like we can say, okay, here's Muslim community, here's Christian community, and we can put a line between them. And we can say, well, God must be out here, he's closer to the Christian community side. And then that's what we believe. We're closer to God because we have a faith that we're convicted. We're convicted. But here's the funny thing. In the Christian community, there are many people who are going closer to God. But then we all know some people who are in the Christian community who are actually going away from God. And then I've met people who are in the Muslim community who seem to be going towards God. Even though they haven't crossed that line that we call Christian community, they're going towards God. Well, there's these other Christians who are obviously not going towards God. So it starts to blur these lines of community. And then you wonder, who should we really be in community with? And then I'm just struck about community in the Old Testament. Israel is the people of God. But they're always in the Old Testament, encountering other nations. Those other nations are often getting mixed into Israel. It's not cut and dry clean. And then you look at the people who Jesus went to, and the people who the apostles went to. Community is, I don't know, fill in the blank for me. Community is,
I'm going to jump in here, Jeff, just because I think I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure that there are going to be some have rolling through their mind, and that is to say, okay, but you're blurring the lines for me, Jeff. Doesn't the Bible teach us that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and it's only Jesus? What you're talking about is something else than that. So clarify for me, isn't Jesus just the way, the truth, and the life, and that's the only way?
yes. But I think some people, when they imagine Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life, imagine a very, very narrow, skinny road, a tiny little laser beam, and a really simple truth that can be put into one sentence and maybe 3 words. Because frankly, we want things to be simple and easy. But Jesus wants us to take up his cross, and I don't think that was simple and easy. And so I've been challenged to reimagine Jesus as a way, like an ocean, and we chart a course. As light, like the sunlight that illumines the whole earth. And truth, as Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? Jesus never summarized truth as a single sentence that we just have to say, this is true. And so a relationship with Jesus is truth. And this is interesting. If you're going to get married, there's an old English word that you are betrothed. Now our word truth is related to that. And betrothal is about relationship. And so truth is about relationship. And truth is very much related to trust. Truth isn't scientific fact. Truth is trust. And so I think that is what Jesus is calling us into when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. A relationship, a connection with the way, the truth, and the life, not a religion. And I think we have taken Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life and tried to construct a religion around that. I think Jesus himself challenges that conception. Because all throughout the New Testament, did Jesus ever convert anyone to another religion? He said, come and follow me. He converted people called them to repentance to him.
I want to make sure that you
I'm not
guys
giving
have
you guys
a
an
chance
answer. I'm just giving you some,
Yeah.
some real ponderings here.
It's good stuff, Jeff. It's good stuff to ponder. I want to make sure that people have a chance to jump in. So feel free to go with your questions, folks.
Throw one out there.
And
So I
hey,
hear-
what is like here? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I hear language like this, and I'm certainly intrigued, but I can think of many peers of mine who would hear that and go, doesn't that make you a universalist? And I wonder how you'd respond, or if this is the first time you've heard that.
You know, I'm not a universalist because universalists claim to know too much. Universalists somehow have this bird's eye view, or bigger than a bird's eye view, where they can see the whole universe and everything and be able to make the claim, well, all religions lead to God. Well, how does the universalist know that? I think the only person who could possibly be able to substantiate and make the universalist claim is God himself. Anybody else is just a human being. And this is, for me, very important. Is the first sin in many ways was trying to become like God, and we're still trying to do that in so many different ways. And one is to put ourselves in a position where we can see the whole universe and make claims like this, that all roads lead to God. And I think we have to come back. And that's why when so many questions come to me like, you know, is it true that all religions lead to God? And I have to say, you know what? Honestly, I don't know. It could be, but I don't know. So I have to make my confession. And I think Christians need to be doing more confessing of who we are, what we know, we're good and we're bad, than we are professing in the sense of preaching and telling people else what's the truth. We need to keep looking for that truth in us. And one of these points is to just say, gee, I don't know. But there are some things I'm sure of, and there are some things I'm convicted of, and I have some habits, and I'm going to follow them. And the decisions that only God can make, I'm going to let God make those. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for many of us who want to be sure in our faith, to be able to say, I don't know, but I'm convicted. Do you have the bumper sticker in Canada, Jesus is the answer? Yeah, that's one of those cute little truths that you can put into one sentence with 3 words. Well, if Jesus is the answer, what's the question? The question could be, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Jesus is the answer. Nonsense. I think Jesus is the question. You know, if you have all the answers in life, if you have all the answers, then who are you? You're not a human being anymore because you know everything, you're God. So part of being human is not knowing the answer. And I think Jesus is the question. Jesus calls us into the way, into a quest. And I think that's really what the Christian faith is about. It's living the questions, the questing. It's seeking the answers, which always seem to be just kind of just out of grasp. And so we carry on in faith. So that means we have to have a little humility about us in our evangelism work. But the power of being able to say, I don't know. You know, we all don't like those people who think they're know-it-alls and have all the answers. But when somebody gives you an honest, truthful, I don't know, you walk away saying, oh, that person told the truth. That's a good person. A person I might want to have a relationship with. I could stand by that person. I could walk with them. Maybe we can figure this out together. I'm rambling again. You guys got to stop me.
Next question.
Should I ask a question? So in
Yeah.
like a campus ministry point of view, then like, are you saying then like a good way to like minister on campus is not by necessarily like evangelizing, but by like creating community and then being open and like open with what we believe and open with our questions and open
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah, I think it's being honest.
But then,
I mean, a lot of times in evangelism, we put on this. I mean, I've experienced this too. You know, like I told you, when I moved to different places, I think I'm a different person. And Sid, you probably had this too. When you go to church and you stand behind a pulpit, doesn't it sometimes feel like you change into something else? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like you have to put on this super confident, I'm the preacher, I know it. And now I'm going to tell you because I'm the mouthpiece of God. And you kind of like have to psych yourself up into that role. And it's not quite you. And then when you're done preaching, you kind of like come out of it. It's kind of, you know, kind of like when the Hulk becomes Dr. Bannon again, there's like that in between time and you just kind of shrink down and you just crash out. I think we have to find ways to evangelize that show our true selves. If we're hurting, our evangelism should show that. If we're doubting, our evangelism should show that. Our human evangelism needs to speak the truth that we're able to speak through ourselves. And what I've discovered and what's really led me into dialogue work is I discovered that people change when they're listened to. I don't know why preachers haven't figured this out, but I guess it put us out of business. When people are listened to, they change. When they're told what to do, they go and do the opposite. I think if we want to transform people, if we want to see people converted, we need to be listeners.
Sounds like you're advocating for the confessional booth, Jeffrey. I'm kidding.
Okay, we can stay in business then.
I'm somewhat in jest. I've often thought that there's such merit because it's that listening factor. That if people feel like they can go to church to unburden themselves instead of going to church to feel like they have to learn something in terms of how to do it better, there is definitely that deeper sense of empowerment, and so I would agree with you from an evangelism standpoint. If you make room for people,
you've had a crappy. This is why I think some people hate church, and I hate it too. Is you've had a really crappy week. It's Sunday morning. You don't want to get out of bed. You're pissed off, and then you go into church, and now it's time to praise and worship. I didn't say bull to that. If I feel crappy, I want God to know I feel crappy. Let's be honest. If I'm having doubts, I want to be able to, in the church, tell God, I'm doubting right now, dude. I think that's witness, that kind of confessing, because it's honest. And it feels much better to me.
Sounds like the Psalms.
I like this one.
Is there another question or two there? I mean, I have one more that I want to get to, and it's already 7:04, but I do want to make sure that if you've got a particular question for Jeff that you have the opportunity to ask it.
Hey, Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. Yes, please, true.
Hey, yeah, so I think what you're doing and what you've described is really interesting. I think when I was doing my undergraduate, I also tried to like build relationships with people from other faiths, so because they are the best people to represent and describe what it is they believe, and from that contrast, you understand what you believe. But one thing really interesting I found about what you shared was that the government won't let you talk negatively about another religion or what you find to be negatives in other religions. And I just know that from my experience, part of like building strong relationships with other people of different faiths in part comes down to also accepting that we see things differently, and we see things differently on like issues that are indivisible, in the sense that like I think Christianity isn't pluralistic, isn't there are multiple ways to know God, like it's through Jesus. And I think being able to express those views and like where I believe that Christianity offers people more out of life and can point to parts in my own life to show that, that's where I was able to have the most engaging and humanizing conversation with other people, because it takes a while to build a relationship with someone of a different religion to where like we can both share honestly. But then I think the real test is when you say, and I think what I believe has more merit than what you believe, and these are the advantages to why I believe over what you believe. And in doing so, you are saying that there are negatives by contrast. And so I was wondering, like, do you ever get to that point? Like, or because I can't imagine deep conversations where the only thing you're allowed to say is what's positive about your religion.
Yeah, good point. My approach to interreligious dialogue is not agreement. Our aim is not to agree, but it's to understand. And there's a difference between agreeing with something and understanding something. You can understand it, but disagree. But the third part is friendship. So my really approach is we don't aim at agreement, we seek understanding and friendship. And friendship is deep. It allows us to speak to the other and say, I don't like this about you, or this bothers me about you. A deep friendship allows you to say, I disagree with you for this reason. I think we have to be a little bit careful, though, when we try to make the argument that our faith has something more than another person's faith, because all of our religions are of this world. And in that sense, they're equal. And I think we have to look at what we're doing when we're making that apologetic move, is we're really trying to convince ourselves by saying, okay, I think I'm right. I think I'm right. If I can just convince these other people that I'm right and everybody else thinks that I'm right, then I am right. And I think that's what we need as Christians, to step back a little bit and just be a little bit more humble. Maybe we are right, but that again, that's what God knows and we don't. So at that, what I've discovered is, and as a missionary, it was okay, we need to be evangelistic. We need to take a head-on, defense of the faith and an apologetic approach. But I really wonder if in our day and age, an apologetic approach is the best way to share the gospel with people. Especially after we have this legacy of the gospel, the Bible, going hand in hand with the sword. And what Muslims often experience from Christians is the sword. And now you come with a Bible and they think, oh, the Bible's a sword. It's going to hurt me. That's not what we want to convey to people. So I keep thinking about, okay, what are the other ways we as Christians can speak? Can we speak comforting words to people of other faiths? Yeah, I think we can. We do in our Christian community, and those outside our community are human beings too. So I think that's a challenge for us, is to pay attention to how we're speaking as Christians, and just maybe pull back on that apologetic approach a little bit. Because most of our apologetics are built on enlightenment understandings of truth. You know, that makes truth a fact. Christianity is not a fact. It's not a scientific fact that we can prove. It's a conviction that we have in our hearts. Though I gave another long answer, I got to stop doing this. But you can forgive me because it's 4 a.m. in the morning.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I guess a quick follow-up to that is, do you not see the Bible's God as being one that is, you know, definitive in the sense that there's no postmodernist view of like maybe they're right, maybe we're right, or like there are multiple ways to God. Because I just read the Bible's God, and this God seems very interested in people identifying God accurately, and it seems to imply that people have the capacity to define God accurately, and that people love to celebrate other gods, and the God of the Bible is not the most happy about that. And the God of the Bible is quite interested in having people recognize him accurately.
The God of the Bible. The Bible's God. But the funny thing is that the Bible's God is the God of the universe, of which the Bible is a part. It's not so much the Bible's God, but it's God's Bible. And God has spoken through the Bible, but he also speaks in so many, many various ways. And the Bible even says that. One thing I think that many of us who are Protestant and evangelical have to think more deeply about is how we've turned the Bible into an idol. Because if we can know everything through the Bible, again, my definition of God is something that is beyond our knowing. Now, that doesn't mean we can't know it. It means that we can infinitely know it. That means the more you learn about God, the more there is to learn about God. And guess what? The Bible is limited. It's not all in there. There is so much more. The Bible is just a little piece of, I think it's more than a trilogy. The Bible is just a little piece of this story. There's so much more out there. I mean, that's why you go to university, to learn all of this stuff that is God's truth. You study physics, you're studying God. So I think we've tried to jam our God into the Bible, and God is in the Bible. But there's so much more of God that's not in the Bible. Now, I'm not being pluralistic here. I'm just making God, my God, really, really big. I think we Christians make our God too small sometimes.
These are some big themes that you're getting us to crunch here, Jeff, which is good.
Like I told you, it's 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm having nightmares right now.
Yeah, well,
you all have that dream where you're
I think
a tiny little speck floating through the universe.
Well, I think there's going to be lots to chew on coming out of this, which is great. I'm glad of that because I think there is a delicate balance in trying to wrestle with where's the specificity of God,
Yeah.
and where are the limits of my knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with you. I think the problem of the scripture says as soon as we think that we can know the difference between good and evil, which is the tree of Genesis, that's where things fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a key theme of scripture that people forget. And then we like to present Christianity in a way that we're all knowing.
Yeah.
And there's an absolute balance there.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I do also think there is a component in which God is that God makes himself known in specific ways for specific reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our reality of following Jesus is also conforming to that which we know.
Yeah.
Not simply saying, well, I have to do it all.
And we go deeper and
I think
deeper.
that's more problematic.
The more you know,
Yeah.
the more you need to learn. That's why some of you are going on to get master's degrees. You probably won't stop there, You just keep learning. And I think the way I could encapsulate that into a simple one sentence, three word truth is, I guess, to summarize it all up, I've discovered that Jesus is the question. Jesus is not the answer. Jesus is the question. And Jesus is leading us deeper and deeper into knowledge, into love, into hope. I don't know, think about that. And then as evangelists, my task is to preach. Jesus is the question. Follow Jesus. He's not a commodity you can have like I have the truth. He's something that we follow.
I do want to pick up on one more thing. I mean, it is 7:16 already, and I'm cognizant of people's time. But I'm wondering if you can just briefly touch on the notion of scriptural reasoning as the Amana Centre encourages it, because I think there's a tangible practice that can be applied to the public university setting that allows for Christian witness.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about scriptural reasoning.
Yeah, scriptural reasoning is an approach to interreligious dialogue where we start with scripture and we end with scripture, but not just the Bible. So in groups, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Wiccans, there's a group going in Alberta that involves Wiccans. We bring our texts and we read our texts together, and we try to understand each other's texts and understand how others are convicted of their texts. And so it's a very interesting practice. It's just beautiful. I mean, when I read the Bible, I don't want to read it with other Christians anymore. I want to read it with Muslims, because the Muslims bring up really interesting questions that my Christian friends don't even think about. When I read the Bible with Christians, it's just kind of like, oh, same old, we all got these answers. But when you read it with Muslims, fresh questions come out. So for me, reading the Bible with people of other faiths has been a very powerful way to grow my own faith. And it's also a way to engage with our faith in public. We set aside our desires to evangelize, but we do bring our desire to want to learn and to seek God. And it's been really profound for me. I'd love to tell stories, Sid, but I have to get on to another meeting too. And I know your night carries on. If you want to continue this conversation, you can invite me back sometime.
Yeah, well, we'll pick up on that because I'd like to talk about with students in terms of the idea of having a
Scriptural
group of
reasoning,
people in the
you can
room.
just go on to the site or Google scripturalreasoning.org, and you'll find some more information and some ideas about it. It's nothing novel, but it's a profound practice. It's been a deeply spiritual practice for me.
Yeah. Jeff, I want to thank you for taking the time and getting up early this morning and being able to join us on this Tuesday evening. We're glad that you're able to do this for us.
Thank you.